There's no control over the breeding. They're being sold to just about anybody.
Dead cats are worth more than live cats.
It's deeper than me and tigers, Tom. It's about freedom.
A Minnesota woman is dead tonight after she was attacked by one of her own tigers.
I'm here with Camilla Kellerman-Dre, and we're here to talk about The Tiger Next Door, her brilliant movie. My first question to you is, what inspired you to make this movie?
There was a woman in New Jersey who had 24 tigers, and she had had them for a long time, and the state was moving in to confiscate them, actually, because they felt that she was not actually able to keep them in humane and safe conditions. She fought them for a number of years and then actually lost repeatedly. But I started following that story, thinking it was incredibly unique and fascinating. And then, of course, it turns out that people are keeping these animals all over the country. They're keeping lions, tigers, bears, very large wild animals, basically in private captivity. And even more amazingly, many of them are breeding them and actually selling them to other private individuals. And in some cases it's legal, and in some cases it's not.
I would say in 20 years' time, I have probably sold under 100.
So I actually worked on the film. This is a classic independent film story for 2.5 years. So I worked on this documentary for 2.5 years before I found Dennis.
The plan was to sell a few white cats and support all the tigers.
Because when we found Dennis, we realized that he brought some important elements that made him sort of the perfect focal point and gave us a narrative arc for the film, because we didn't know yet what the outcome would be for him.
I want to see you out of business.
Well,
I want to see you
too bad,
with
'cause I'm
never
back in
another
business.
tiger. They're going to come hang your ass.
Plus, he represented a lot of the same characteristics that we had seen in other parts of the country. He also had 24 tigers. He had had them for a long time. He was breeding them. And then once you see the film, when you see him, you also know why he is a particularly compelling case on film.
You'd rather starve than see them, you know, starve.
Look out.
Good guy.
It's not a good idea to rub a cat's back while it's got its food, but if you can do it, do it.
His story is actually punctuated or interrupted by a series of much larger and rather increasingly horrifying and disturbing cases about mostly tiger situations gone bad. But the truth is, it could have been about a lot of other large wild animals as well. So the idea is that by the end of the film, you're supposed to realize that however you feel about Dennis, good, bad, indifferent, that he's just a small piece of this story.
There has now been a fatal tiger attack at the San Francisco Zoo.
And that the bigger question is, what, as a society, what do we want our relationship to these animals to be? What do we want our laws to look like? What do we want? So I guess that is the journey that I went on.
Everybody'd be better off if Hill wasn't there.
How would you describe Dennis as a character? Not even as a character, but how would you describe him?
As a person.
Yeah, as a person.
You know, I really struggled with, does he really love these animals? Like, he could not be doing this if he really loved them, and that must be all a manipulation and a fraud. It's tough. That's the other thing I think this is a huge learning, is that we as a society, we want to root for the underdog. Dennis is definitely the underdog in this story, but he's not doing the right thing.
Right.
So that is very confusing, and I think for some of us makes it really interesting, fascinating, and very human, very real. You know, but for other people it's really disturbing.
Worst case scenario, a tornado comes through and rips those cages down, and those tigers are loose.
Does he have a tranquilizer gun? A gun? Can he legally have that?
He has a criminal record about like this.
When you were filming this movie, how close did you actually get to the tigers, and did you ever feel that your safety was in jeopardy?
I did have one experience where it was the very last shoot. We were actually in Wisconsin at a sanctuary, private sanctuary, and I had left something down in the compound, and it was the only time I had ever gone alone, basically, down into one of these compounds. So I went, and it was set up so that there were cages. It was like a big U. There were cages on both sides, and so I was basically surrounded by tigers, leopards, cougars, all just watching me go. And you could sense the difference. I mean, clearly I am prey, and they're predators, and I'm not known to them, and it was dark, and it was instantaneous. I was like, oh, right, this is really what it is.
There was one little part in the movie where I think one of his workers rams a backhoe or some big vehicle into the cage, and it dislodges a clamp that's holding the fencing in, and you have that shot of the tiger just going crazy.
Actually, we don't have the footage of him knocking the clamp off, but that's the story or the excuse that he gives for why Tazzy, this tiger, is able to knock the wall off the cage. Basically, this is during the time that they're preparing them for transport to move them off the property. She's very disturbed by the activity that's going on, and this full-grown female tiger, she basically jumps off the wall and she knocks the wall of the cage off.
Wait!
Do you know what he's doing now?
Yeah. Well, Dennis's situation was that he had a collection of 24 tigers, 3 bears, 6 leopards. When we started, he had lost his federal license. He had a federal license to keep and breed tigers. He lost that license. The state did ultimately grant him 3 permits to keep tigers. The state will not and cannot sanction breeding, but clearly that's Dennis's ultimate wish, is to get his USDA license back and be able to breed again. And so he is strategically keeping and collecting animals with this white gene or other unusually colored genes.
The white babies, they're the big sellers to the famous people with the money, and
that's a whole other issue which actually we dealt with in the film, but not in so much depth, with this obsession with the white tiger, and that is actually a genetic mutation. And so a big concern in the animal welfare community is that to get the white tigers, you're usually inbreeding. Dennis has a whole theory that he's not, but anyway, so he's clearly prepared to do that should he have the opportunity again. But he is not at this point licensed to breed again, and as far as I know, he's not. And you don't have to go home feeling like Dennis is the worst person on the planet to have been alerted to the fact that there's a problem. And we need to make some active decision about it. Like, clearly now we're in this situation, our laws are as inconsistent as they are. We need to make some active decision about what we want to see happen.
And what would you say that active decision should be, in your opinion?
Yeah, at this point, I worked on the film for 6 years. I saw certainly not every situation. I saw a lot of situations, and I would say that ultimately, I think there needs to be a ban on private ownership of large wild animals and a ban on breeding, and that's really the only way to get out of this cycle of private ownership. I haven't seen anywhere that it really works.